The moment Adrian Vale's hand touched hers, the entire ballroom went dead silent. $1 billion empire. A scarred face everyone had just finished mocking, and one dance that was about to destroy every assumption in that room. But what nobody knew, not the investors whispering cruel jokes, not the cameras turning toward them, not even Evelyn herself, was that this wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. This was a debt 10 years old, paid in blood on a battlefield halfway across the world. And before the night ended, that secret would shatter everything. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Ashford Crown Hotel didn't just host events. It swallowed people whole and spit them back out, reminded of exactly where they stood in the world's hierarchy. 23 floors of imported marble, gold leaf trim that probably cost more than most people's houses, and chandeliers that looked like they'd been stolen from a French palace. Tonight, the grand ballroom on the 15th floor glittered with the kind of wealth that didn't bother hiding itself. Adrian Vale stood near the bar, a glass of something expensive he wasn't drinking in his hand, watching the circus unfold. At 32, he'd built Vision Tech from a garage startup into a $9 billion empire in less than a decade. The tech world called him a genius. Wall Street called him unstoppable. His competitors called him ruthless. Right now, he just felt tired. "Daddy, my feet hurt." He looked down at Sophie, his 8-year-old daughter, tugging at his sleeve. She wore a blue dress she'd insisted on because it matched her favorite stuffed elephant, and her dark hair, so much like her mother's it sometimes hurt to look at, was already escaping the clips his housekeeper had carefully arranged this morning. "We've only been here 40 minutes, Bug." 40 minutes is a long time when shoes are squeezing your toes like mean little monsters. Adrian couldn't help the small smile. "Mean little monsters? That's what they feel like." She made a squeezing gesture with her hands. "Like they're mad at my feet for existing." "Find a chair, draw something. I'll come check on you in a few minutes." Sophie nodded and skipped off toward the tables along the east wall, her small backpack, stuffed with markers and her sketchbook, bouncing against her shoulders. Adrian had learned early that bringing entertainment was the only way Sophie survived these events without staging a dramatic escape attempt. "Adrian, there you are!" Marcus Chen appeared beside him, all $1,000 suit and perfectly calculated smile. Vision Tech's CFO, brilliant with numbers, exhausting with people. "Marcus, the Hoffmans want to talk about the Singapore expansion. Peterson's asking about Q3 projections, and somebody from TechCrunch keeps trying to corner you for a quote about the AI ethics panel next month. Tell them I'll make rounds in 20 minutes. 20 minutes? Adrian, these people... 20 minutes. Marcus knew that tone. He nodded and disappeared back into the crowd. Adrian's gaze swept the ballroom. 500 people who'd paid $10,000 a plate for the privilege of being here. The annual Vision Tech Innovation Gala, celebrating another record-breaking year. Celebrating progress. Celebrating the future. Celebrating money. He hated these things. But Sophie had been excited about the fancy hotel and the music and the dessert table someone had mentioned, so here they were. Besides, a percentage of tonight's proceeds went to the Vision Tech Foundation, scholarships, community programs, job training initiatives. His late wife Emma's project, before cancer took her 3 years ago. The least he could do was show up. Near the entrance, a small commotion caught his attention. Security was checking credentials, and a young woman stood awkwardly to the side while a guard examined her invitation with exaggerated suspicion. She wore a simple black dress that looked like it came from a discount store. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, not the elaborate updos most women here wore. She kept her head down, shoulders hunched like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. The guard finally nodded and let her through, but not before making her wait just long enough that everyone nearby noticed the holdup. The woman hurried into the ballroom and immediately headed for the furthest corner, like a rabbit trying to disappear into the underbrush. Who invited the charity case? Adrian's jaw tightened. 2 tables away, Richard Hoffman, investment banker, chronic asshole, was laughing with his wife and another couple. They weren't even trying to be subtle about pointing. "I heard Vale's Foundation handed out a few pity invitations," Mrs. Hoffman said, loud enough to carry. "You know, for optics. Makes them look generous." "Generous would be keeping people like that out of places like this," Richard replied. "I paid good money for this ticket. I didn't pay to eat next to someone who looks like they wandered in from a homeless shelter. The other couple laughed, not polite chuckles. Real, genuine amusement at another human being's expense. Adrian set down his glass with more force than necessary. Across the room, the woman found a seat at an empty table near the back wall. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the tablecloth like it held the secrets of the universe. And that's when Adrian saw it. The scar. It ran from her left temple down across her cheek, ending near her jawline, a thick raised line that looked like it had been put there by something violent and permanent. The ballroom lighting hit it at just the right angle, making it impossible to miss. "Oh my God," someone whispered nearby. "What happened to her face?" Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd seen scars before, plenty of them. He had a few himself, hidden under expensive clothes and careful grooming, but it wasn't the scar that got him. It was the way she sat there, absolutely motionless, like she'd learned that invisibility was the safest option. "Daddy!" Sophie appeared again, tugging his sleeve. "What's wrong, Bug?" "Nothing's wrong. I finished my drawing. Want to see?" She held up her sketchbook, a picture of the ballroom, complete with lopsided chandeliers and stick figure people in fancy clothes. In the corner, she'd drawn what looked like a dragon wearing a bow tie. "Who's that?" "That's Gerald. He's the dragon who lives in the hotel and makes sure the food tastes good." "Gerald the quality control dragon." "Exactly." Sophie beamed, then her expression shifted, curious. "Who's that lady?" She was pointing toward the woman in the corner. "I don't know, sweetheart." "She looks sad." "Maybe she's just tired." "No." Sophie shook her head with the absolute certainty only children possess. "She's sad. I can tell." Before Adrian could respond, Sophie was already walking toward the woman's table. Sophie, but his daughter had inherited her mother's stubborn streak and his complete disregard for social conventions. She marched right up to the woman and stood there waiting to be noticed. The woman finally looked up, startled. "Hi," Sophie said. "I'm Sophie. What's your name?" The woman blinked, clearly not expecting to be approached by anyone, much less a small child. "I'm Evelyn." Her voice was quiet, careful, like someone who'd learned that speaking too loud invited attention she didn't want. "That's a pretty name," Sophie announced. "Want to see my drawing of Gerald the dragon?" Evelyn's expression flickered, confusion mixed with something that might have been the beginning of a smile. "Who's Gerald?" "He lives in the hotel. He's very important." And just like that, Sophie launched into an elaborate explanation of Gerald's responsibilities, his favorite foods, and his ongoing feud with the hotel's chandelier crystals, which apparently had attitudes. Adrian watched from across the room as something impossible happened. Evelyn smiled. Not much, just a tiny lifting at the corners of her mouth. But it was there. Sophie kept talking, completely unbothered by the scar everyone else couldn't stop staring at. She showed Evelyn her entire sketchbook, narrating each drawing with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for discovering buried treasure. And Evelyn listened, really listened, like Sophie was the most interesting person in the entire ballroom. "Your daughter's very sweet." Adrian turned. An older woman stood beside him, board member, he thought, though he couldn't remember her name. "She is. It's kind of her to talk to that poor girl. Not many people would." The way she said it, like Sophie was doing charity work, made Adrian's teeth grind. Sophie talks to whoever interests her. She doesn't need it to be kind. The woman blinked, smile faltering. "Oh, well, yes, of course." She moved away quickly. Adrian looked back at Sophie and Evelyn. His daughter had pulled out her markers and was now drawing something new while Evelyn watched, that tiny smile still there. "Can you believe they let someone like that in here?" Adrian went very still. Richard Hoffman again, now standing with a group of investors Adrian recognized. Tech money, old money, new money, all the same arrogance. "I mean, I'm all for charity," Richard continued, "but there's a time and place. This isn't a soup kitchen." "Someone should tell Vale his foundation is getting a little too inclusive," another man added. "There's supporting the community, and then there's making the rest of us uncomfortable." A woman in the group laughed. "Can you imagine? Sitting next to her at dinner, I'd lose my appetite." They weren't even lowering their voices anymore. Adrian's hands clenched. Across the ballroom, Evelyn's shoulders had tensed. She'd heard them. Of course she'd heard them. Everyone had heard them. Sophie was still drawing, oblivious. Honestly, who would even dance with someone like that? Richard said, grinning. Can you picture it? Excuse me, miss. Would you like to trip over my feet while everyone stares at your face? The group erupted in laughter, and that's when Adrian saw it happen. Evelyn's hands, which had been resting on the table, started trembling, just slightly, like she was using every ounce of control she had to hold herself together. Sophie looked up from her drawing, confused by the laughter. What's funny? She asked Evelyn. Evelyn didn't answer. Her eyes were wet. Hey, Sophie said, quieter now. Are you okay? Evelyn stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I have to go, she whispered. I'm sorry. I have to. She was halfway to the exit when Adrian moved. He didn't think about it, didn't calculate the optics or consider the consequences or run through the potential fallout. He just moved. Evelyn. She stopped, turning slowly. Adrian stood there, aware that the entire ballroom was now watching them. The laughter had died. Conversations had stopped mid-sentence. 500 people holding their breath. He walked toward her, not quickly, not dramatically, just steadily, until he was standing directly in front of her. Up close, he could see that her eyes were hazel, that she was probably close to his age, that the scar was old, years healed, but the wound underneath was still fresh. Don't go, he said quietly. I don't belong here. Neither do I. That got a reaction, confusion flickering across her face. I'm serious, Adrian continued. I built the company. I signed the checks for this whole circus. And I still don't belong here. These people? He gestured around the ballroom. Half of them I wouldn't trust with a goldfish. The other half I actively avoid. Then why are you here? My daughter likes the dessert table. It was such an absurd answer that Evelyn almost laughed. Almost. I heard what they said, Adrian told her. Every word. And they're wrong. They're not wrong. Look at me. I am looking at you. Evelyn's breath caught. I'm looking at you, Adrian repeated, and what I see is someone who had the courage to walk into a room full of people who'd judge her before she even sat down. That takes guts. More than anyone else here has. I should go. You should dance with me. The words came out before Adrian fully realized he was saying them. Evelyn stared at him like he'd just suggested they set the building on fire. What? Dance with me. Right now. Right here. You're insane. Probably. But I'm also the guy who wrote the checks, which means I can do whatever I want. He extended his hand. So, what do you say? Evelyn looked at his hand like it was a trap. Why are you doing this? Good question. Adrian wasn't entirely sure himself. Maybe it was the way those investors had laughed. Maybe it was the way Evelyn had sat there, trying so hard to be invisible. Maybe it was because Sophie had seen something in her worth talking to, and his daughter was a better judge of character than anyone else in this room. Or maybe it was because 3 years ago, Emma had made him promise something. Don't let the money turn you into them, she'd said, too weak to sit up but still fierce. Don't let Sophie grow up thinking kindness is weakness. Because, Adrian said quietly, someone once told me that how you treat people when nobody's watching tells you who you really are. But how you treat them when everyone's watching, that tells you who you choose to be. Evelyn's eyes were bright with unshed tears. They'll laugh at you too. Let them. They'll take pictures. It'll be in the news, social media, everywhere. I know. Your reputation, my reputation, Adrian interrupted gently, will survive me dancing with a woman at my own gala. Will you? Evelyn looked around the ballroom. All those eyes. All that judgment. Then she looked at Sophie, who'd appeared beside them, and was watching with wide, hopeful eyes. Please dance with Daddy, Sophie whispered. He's really sad most of the time, and he pretends he's not, but I know. Maybe dancing will help. Adrian felt something crack in his chest. Evelyn's hand was shaking when she placed it in his. The ballroom exploded into whispers. Adrian led her toward the center of the floor, aware of every camera turning, every phone rising, every conversation stopping mid-word. The orchestra, confused but professional, shifted into a waltz. I don't really know how to do this, Evelyn admitted. Neither do I. Emma tried to teach me for our wedding, and I stepped on her feet 6 times. Your wife? She passed away. 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Me too. They started moving, awkward at first, Adrian trying to remember the steps while Evelyn followed his lead with the hesitant grace of someone expecting disaster. Look at me, Adrian said quietly. Not them, me. Evelyn lifted her eyes. That's it. Just like that. This is completely insane. Yeah. You're going to regret this tomorrow. Probably not. Everyone's staring. I know. I can't breathe. Breathe anyway. And somehow, impossibly, Evelyn smiled. A real smile this time, not the tiny half version from earlier. There it is, Adrian said. There what is? That, right there. That's what they should have been looking at. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. They danced. Not gracefully, not perfectly. Adrian definitely stepped on her foot once, and Evelyn apologized even though it was his fault. But they danced, and slowly something shifted in the ballroom. The whispers changed tone. The stares softened. A few people even started smiling, genuine smiles, not the cruel ones from before. Daddy, Evelyn, Sophie appeared at the edge of the dance floor, holding up her sketchbook. She'd drawn a new picture, Adrian and Evelyn in the center, surrounded by stars. And above them, in big colorful letters, my daddy dancing with a princess. The ballroom went completely silent. Evelyn made a sound, half laugh, half sob. Sophie ran forward and hugged Evelyn's legs, nearly knocking her over. You're pretty, Sophie announced to the entire room. Everyone here is wrong and dumb and you're pretty. Adrian watched Evelyn fall apart and pull herself back together in the same breath. She dropped to her knees and hugged Sophie so tightly his daughter squeaked. Thank you, Evelyn whispered. Thank you, sweetheart. And in that moment, standing in the center of a ballroom full of people who judged her, mocked her, and tried to make her invisible, Evelyn Carter looked like exactly what Sophie had called her, a princess. Adrian glanced around the room. Richard Hoffman had gone pale. Mrs. Hoffman was staring at her shoes. The investors who'd laughed earlier looked like they desperately wished they could disappear. Good. Adrian reached down and lifted Sophie into his arms. Come on, Bug, let's get you some dessert before you stage a complete overthrow of the social order. What's an overthrow? What you just did. Sophie grinned. Evelyn stood slowly, wiping her eyes. Thank you, she said to Adrian. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I should probably go before... Adrian shifted Sophie to one arm and reached into his jacket pocket for a business card. Except his hand hit something else first. An old blue handkerchief, faded and worn. He'd forgotten it was there. Adrian pulled it out, intending to move it aside, but the moment Evelyn saw it, she froze. Completely. Utterly. Frozen. Her face went white. Where did you get that? Her voice was barely audible. Adrian looked down at the handkerchief. This? I've had it for years. Why? Where did you get that? Something in her tone made Sophie squirm in his arms. Daddy, is everything okay? Adrian set Sophie down gently. Bug, go grab some dessert. I'll be right there. But now, sweetheart. Sophie recognized that voice. She nodded and hurried toward the dessert table, looking back over her shoulder with worried eyes. Adrian turned back to Evelyn. She was shaking. Not like before. Not from embarrassment or nerves. From something much, much deeper. That handkerchief, she said, voice breaking, belonged to my brother, Noah Carter. He disappeared 11 years ago during a military deployment. We never found out what happened to him. We never even got a body. Her eyes locked onto Adrian's. So I'm asking you one more time, where did you get that? And just like that, the entire night shifted into something neither of them had seen coming. Adrian looked at the handkerchief in his hand, at Evelyn's face, at the scar that suddenly made horrible, terrible sense. We need to talk, he said quietly. Somewhere private. Tell me now. Evelyn, tell me now. Her voice cracked across the ballroom like a gunshot. Everyone turned. Adrian took a breath. Your brother saved my life, he said, and he died doing it. Evelyn's legs gave out. Adrian caught her before she hit the floor. Adrian managed to get Evelyn into a chair before her knees completely buckled. Someone nearby gasped. Phones appeared, cameras clicking. Marcus materialized out of nowhere with a glass of water that nobody touched. "Give us space," Adrian said sharply to the crowd pressing closer. "Now!" The authority in his voice scattered people like startled birds. Within seconds, a small perimeter had formed around them, close enough to watch, far enough to pretend they weren't. Evelyn sat there staring at the handkerchief in Adrian's hand like it was a grenade with the pin pulled. "How?" she whispered. "How did you know my brother?" Adrian crouched down so they were eye level. This wasn't a conversation he'd ever planned to have. Wasn't a conversation he'd had with anyone except his therapist and a bottle of scotch at 3 a.m. "I served," he said quietly. "Before Vision Tech. Before any of this. I was military intelligence stationed in Kandahar." Evelyn's breathing was shallow, rapid. Noah was Special Forces, different unit, different mission parameters, but we crossed paths at the forward operating base. He was... Adrian paused, choosing his words carefully. He was a good guy, really good guy. Had pictures of his family taped inside his locker. Talked about his little sister constantly. "Me," Evelyn's voice cracked. "He talked about me?" "All the time. Drove his squad insane. My sister's in college. My sister's studying architecture. My sister sent me cookies that taste like cardboard, but I'm eating them anyway because she made them." A sound escaped Evelyn, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "The cookies were terrible," she admitted. "I didn't know what I was doing, but he never said anything. He just kept asking for more." Adrian nodded. "Yeah, that sounds like him." The ballroom had gone so quiet you could hear the chandeliers humming. "What happened?" Evelyn asked. "The military told us there was an incident, that his unit was compromised during an operation, that there were no survivors, but they wouldn't give us details, wouldn't tell us anything except that he was gone." Adrian's jaw tightened. He'd spent 3 years trying not to think about that day, trying to bury it under business deals and late nights at the office and the consuming work of raising Sophie alone. But standing here now, looking at Evelyn's face, at that scar, he realized he'd never really buried it at all. "We were running intelligence gathering in a village about 40 clicks from the base," Adrian began, his voice low. "Routine operation. Supposed to be in and out in 3 hours. But intelligence is only good until it isn't." Evelyn leaned forward, hands gripping the edge of the chair. "We got bad information. The village wasn't sympathetic. It was a trap. 15 hostiles, maybe 20, waiting for us to walk right in. We took fire the second our convoy stopped." Adrian's hand moved to his shoulder unconsciously, the place where a bullet had torn through muscle and bone and kept going. "It was chaos, complete chaos. Half our team went down in the first 30 seconds. I took a round to the shoulder, another grazed my head. I couldn't see straight, couldn't think. And then the RPG hit our vehicle." He stopped, swallowing hard. "I should have died in that explosion. Would have, except Noah's unit was running a parallel operation 2 miles out. They heard the firefight and diverted. Went completely off mission to get to us." Evelyn's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. "Noah pulled me out of the wreckage," Adrian continued. "Dragged me behind cover while rounds were hitting everything around us. I was barely conscious, bleeding everywhere. And this guy I'd only talked to a handful of times, he looked at me and said, 'You're not dying today, Vale. I've got too many stories about my sister I haven't told you yet.'" A tear rolled down Evelyn's cheek, cutting a path through her makeup. "We held position for 17 minutes while his team tried to establish an extraction route. But there were too many of them and not enough of us. Noah knew we weren't all getting out." Adrian's voice went flat, emotionless, the only way he could get through it. "He gave the order for his team to pull back with the wounded, said he'd cover the retreat. I tried to argue, but I could barely stand. He just smiled at me, this completely insane smile, and said, 'Tell my sister the cookies were perfect. Tell her I lied because I'm a good brother.'" Evelyn made a sound like something inside her was breaking. "Then he handed me this." Adrian held up the handkerchief. "Said his mom gave it to him before deployment. Said it was lucky. Told me to keep it safe and give it back when we met up at the base." "But you never met up," Evelyn whispered. "No, we never met up." Adrian looked at the faded blue fabric in his hand, worn soft from years of being carried in pockets and bags, washed 100 times, touched 1,000 more. Noah held that position for 4 minutes. Gave us just enough time to get clear. We heard the explosion from half a mile away. By the time reinforcements arrived, there was nothing left to recover. The silence that followed felt like it had weight. Evelyn sat there, tears streaming down her face, and Adrian realized he was crying too. First time in 3 years. First time since Emma's funeral. He saved 6 people that day, Adrian said quietly. 6 soldiers who went home to their families because your brother decided their lives were worth more than his own. Why didn't you tell us? Evelyn's voice was raw. Why didn't you find us? Tell us what happened. I tried. Adrian wiped his eyes roughly. When I got stateside, I looked for your family. But Noah's parents had moved. No forwarding address, no contact information. And you, he gestured at her. You were listed as next of kin, location unknown. I had no way to find you. I was in the hospital, Evelyn said flatly. For 8 months. Adrian's stomach dropped. The accident happened 2 weeks after we got the notification about Noah. I was driving home from campus and I couldn't stop crying. Couldn't see the road, didn't see the semi until it was too late. She touched the scar on her face, fingers tracing the raised line. Shattered my orbital bone. Fractured my skull. They had to do 6 surgeries just to put my face back together. And when I finally woke up, my parents were gone too. Gone? Heart attack, both of them. Within 3 months of each other. The doctor said it was just terrible coincidence, but I know better. They died of broken hearts, lost their son, nearly lost their daughter, and just gave up. Adrian felt like he'd been punched. Evelyn. So I had nobody. No family, no money, medical bills that buried me. I lost my scholarship because I couldn't go back to school. Lost my apartment because I couldn't work. Lost everything except this. She gestured at her scar. To remind me that I used to be someone different. The ballroom was so quiet that Adrian could hear his own heartbeat. I'm sorry, he said, and the words felt pathetically inadequate. I'm so sorry. For what? You didn't cause the accident. You didn't kill my brother. No, but I lived because of him. Built all of this. Adrian gestured around the ballroom at the wealth and success and empire he'd created. Because he gave me the chance to. And you ended up with nothing. I didn't end up with nothing. Evelyn's voice was bitter. I ended up with people staring at me like I'm a monster. With jobs that won't hire me because I don't fit their image. With nights where I can't sleep because I keep thinking about how different everything could have been if I just pulled over. If I just waited 5 minutes before getting in that car. Evelyn, and tonight I came here because some foundation program sent me an invitation, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I could feel normal for a few hours. But I can't. Because normal people don't look like me. Normal people don't clear rooms just by existing. She stood up abruptly. I need to leave. Don't. Adrian stood too. Please, stay. Why? So I can be your charity case? So you can feel better about surviving while my brother died? The words hit like a slap. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Evelyn demanded. You feel guilty? You want to help the poor scarred girl because her brother saved you? I don't need your pity, Mr. Vale. It's not pity. Then what? Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it. Because honestly, he didn't have a clean answer. Guilt was definitely part of it. But there was something else too. Something he'd felt the moment he saw her sitting alone in that corner, trying to be invisible. Recognition. I know what it's like, he said finally, to feel like you're broken. Like the person you used to be died, and you're just walking around pretending to be them. Evelyn's expression flickered. When Emma died, Adrian continued, everyone kept telling me I was so strong, so brave, raising Sophie alone, running the company, moving forward. But the truth is I wasn't moving forward. I was just moving, running so fast I didn't have time to feel anything. And somewhere along the way I forgot how to stop. He looked at her directly. So no, this isn't pity. This is me recognizing someone else who knows what it's like to lose everything and keep walking anyway. Evelyn's eyes were wet again. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be around people anymore. How to exist in spaces like this without feeling like I'm taking up room I don't deserve. Neither do I. But maybe we can figure it out together. It was such a simple statement, but something about it made Evelyn's carefully constructed walls crack just slightly. Daddy? They both turned. Sophie stood a few feet away, holding a plate piled high with desserts, chocolate cake, cookies, some kind of elaborate pastry situation that looked structurally unsound. "Is Evelyn okay?" Sophie asked quietly. Adrian glanced at Evelyn, who was wiping her eyes and trying to pull herself together. "I'm okay, sweetheart," Evelyn managed, "just talking about some sad things." Sophie walked over and carefully set the plate down on the nearest table. Then she did something that made every adult in the vicinity stop breathing. She walked right up to Evelyn and hugged her. Not a quick hug, a real one. The kind kids give when they mean it. "I'm sorry you're sad," Sophie said into Evelyn's dress. "Being sad is the worst. When Mommy died, I was sad for a really long time. Daddy too, even though he pretended he wasn't." Evelyn looked at Adrian over Sophie's head, and he saw his own grief reflected back at him. "Your mommy sounds like she was wonderful," Evelyn said softly. "She was the best. She used to make pancakes shaped like animals, and she knew all the constellations, and she never got mad when I asked too many questions." Sophie pulled back, looking up at Evelyn seriously. "Do you know any constellations?" "I used to, before the accident. I was studying architecture and I took an astronomy class because I thought it might help with understanding how buildings relate to light and space." Sophie's eyes went wide. "You build buildings?" "I wanted to. I don't anymore." "Why not?" Such a simple question, such a complicated answer. "Because sometimes," Evelyn said carefully, "when bad things happen, it's hard to remember how to do the things you used to love." Sophie considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. "That's dumb." "Sophie," Adrian warned. "No, I mean it. That's dumb. If you love something, you should do it. That's what Mommy always said. She said life's too short to not do things that make you happy." Evelyn smiled despite herself. "Your mommy was very smart." "I know." Sophie grabbed Evelyn's hand. "Okay, come on. I want to show you something." Before either adult could object, Sophie was pulling Evelyn toward the massive windows overlooking the city. Adrian followed, aware that the entire ballroom was watching this strange little procession. "See?" Sophie pressed her nose against the glass, pointing at the skyline. "All those buildings. You could make one of those. Maybe even better than those." "It's not that simple, sweetheart." "Why not?" "Because I don't have the degree, don't have the connections, don't have the money to start over." "But you have the brain," Sophie insisted. "The brain that knows how to do it. That doesn't go away just because other stuff got hard." Adrian watched Evelyn's expression shift, something between pain and hope. "She's not wrong," he said quietly. Evelyn looked at him. "You don't understand. I've been trying to get back on my feet for years. Every door I knock on slams shut the second they see me. Every opportunity disappears. I'm not exaggerating when I say I'm invisible. Or worse than invisible, I'm actively avoided. So don't knock on their doors." Adrian pulled out his phone. "Make them come to yours." "What are you doing?" Adrian was already typing. "Sending an email to my foundation director. We fund scholarships, job training, mentorship programs. Emma set it up before she died specifically to help people who got dealt a bad hand find their footing again. I don't want charity. It's not charity, it's an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you." He looked up from his phone. "But if you've got half the talent your brother said you had, you'd be wasting it cleaning hotel rooms." He said I had talent? Are you kidding? He showed me your design portfolio on his phone. Kept it saved, even though it ate up half his storage. Said you were going to build something that changed skylines. Evelyn's breath hitched. I forgot he had those pictures. I forgot he saved them. He did. And he believed in you. Adrian put his phone away. So maybe it's time you believed in yourself again. Before Evelyn could respond, a commotion erupted near the center of the ballroom. Richard Hoffman, apparently having found his courage at the bottom of several champagne glasses, was holding court with a group of investors. I mean, it's inspiring and all, he was saying, voice carrying across the room. But let's be realistic. Vale's running a charity case, not a business. Next thing you know, we'll be hiring based on sob stories instead of qualifications. Adrian's expression went cold. Stay here, he told Evelyn. Adrian, don't. But he was already walking toward Hoffman with the kind of focused intensity that made grown men in boardrooms nervous. The crowd parted. Richard, Adrian said pleasantly, enjoying the gala? Hoffman turned, smile faltering slightly when he saw Adrian's face. Oh, absolutely. Great event. Very inclusive. Inclusive. Interesting word choice. Just making an observation. Here's an observation for you. Adrian's voice was still pleasant, but there was steel underneath. You paid $10,000 to be here tonight. Know what that money funds? Hoffman blinked. The foundation, I assume. Specifically, it funds programs that give people second chances, job training, education, mental health support, the kinds of things that help people rebuild their lives after circumstances try to destroy them. Sure, but so here's the thing, Richard. When you mock someone for having the courage to show up, despite knowing people like you would judge them, you're not just being an asshole. You're invalidating the entire purpose of the foundation you just paid to support. The color drained from Hoffman's face. Now I'm going to give you a choice, Adrian continued. You can apologize to that woman over there, sincerely, for your behavior tonight. Or you can leave, immediately. And if you choose the latter, your firm will be removed from our approved vendor list effective Monday morning. Several people gasped. Hoffman's firm handled significant consulting work for Vision Tech. Losing that contract would be a 7-figure hit. You can't be serious. Try me. They stared at each other for a long moment. Hoffman broke first. Fine, he muttered. I'll apologize. Louder, so everyone can hear you. Hoffman's jaw clenched, but he raised his voice. I'll apologize. Then do it. Adrian stepped aside, gesturing toward Evelyn. Hoffman walked over like a man approaching the gallows. Evelyn watched him come with wide eyes, clearly having no idea what to expect. Hoffman cleared his throat. I owe you an apology. What I said earlier was inappropriate and cruel. I'm sorry. The words came out stiff, forced, but they came out. Evelyn stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? I accept your apology. Hoffman looked surprised, like he'd expected her to throw it back in his face. Oh, well, good, thank you. He retreated quickly, grabbing his wife and making a beeline for the exit. Adrian watched them go, then turned to address the ballroom. Anyone else have comments they'd like to share? Now's your chance. Silence. No? Excellent. Then let's remember why we're actually here. To support programs that help people rebuild their lives. To invest in second chances. To recognize that everyone in this room is one bad day away from needing exactly the kind of help this foundation provides. He let that sink in. So enjoy your dinner, enjoy the music, and maybe take a moment to remember that kindness costs nothing, but cruelty costs everything. Adrian walked back to where Sophie and Evelyn stood by the windows. That was intense, Evelyn said quietly. He deserved worse. Maybe, but you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Sophie tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, can Evelyn sit with us at dinner, please? Adrian looked at Evelyn. What do you say? Ready to scandalize the room further by eating at the head table? I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's a great idea, Sophie announced. We can talk about constellations and buildings and Gerald the dragon. Despite everything, Evelyn laughed, a real laugh, not the careful half smiles from earlier. All right, she said, but if I embarrass you, you won't, Adrian interrupted. And even if you did, I've got thick skin. They made their way to the head table, Sophie chattering the entire time about the dessert selection and how she'd managed to sneak 3 pieces of chocolate cake onto her plate without the servers noticing. As they sat down, Marcus appeared looking mildly panicked. Adrian, we need to discuss the Hoffman situation. His firm will be replaced by Monday. Send the list of alternates to my office first thing tomorrow. But, Marcus, not now. The CFO retreated, muttering something about PR disasters and board meetings. Dinner was served, some elaborate multi-course affair that probably cost more per plate than Evelyn made in a month. She picked at her food nervously while Sophie kept up a running commentary on everything from the texture of the risotto to the likelihood that Gerald the dragon had personally approved each dish. She's always like this, Adrian said apologetically. We can't take her anywhere quiet. I like it, Evelyn admitted. It's nice. Normal. Normal is overrated, says the billionaire. Says the guy who'd trade half of it for one more day with his wife. The words came out before Adrian could stop them. Evelyn's expression softened. I'm sorry. That was insensitive of me. No, it's fine. It's true. I have more money than I know what to do with, but Sophie still asks when mommy's coming home, and I still don't know how to answer her. Sophie, oblivious to the conversation, was arranging her peas into a smiley face. How do you do it? Evelyn asked quietly. Raise her alone? Run a company? Be everything to everyone? Badly, Adrian said honestly. I do it badly. I forget school events. I miss bedtimes. I hire people to handle the things I should be handling myself because there's not enough hours in the day. But you're here. Because she wanted to see the fancy hotel. No. I mean, you're here, present, paying attention. That matters more than you think. Adrian looked at his daughter, currently trying to convince a passing waiter that Gerald the dragon required a special dessert delivery. I hope so, he said quietly. The dinner wore on. People came by the table to pay their respects, to congratulate Adrian on another successful year, to pretend they hadn't been whispering cruel things an hour earlier. Evelyn sat through it all, growing quieter as the evening progressed. You okay? Adrian asked during a brief lull. Just tired. It's been a long night. Want to get some air? There's a balcony on this floor. I should probably go home. Or you could stay a little longer. Sophie's not ready to leave yet, and honestly, neither am I. Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. They left Sophie at the care of Adrian's security detail, a detail that consisted of two very large men who Sophie had already recruited into playing tic-tac-toe on napkins and stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched below them, all lights and movement and noise muted by distance. It's beautiful, Evelyn said softly. Emma used to bring me out here when these events got too overwhelming, said the city looked better from far away. She was right. They stood in silence for a moment. Can I ask you something? Evelyn said finally. Anything. Why did you keep the handkerchief? All these years. You could have thrown it away, forgotten about it. Adrian looked down at the blue fabric, still in his pocket. Because, he said quietly, it reminds me that I'm living on borrowed time. That everything I have, Sophie, the company, all of it, exists because someone else decided I was worth saving. And I owe it to him to make that sacrifice mean something. Evelyn's eyes were bright with tears again. He would have liked you, she said. Noah, he would have liked seeing what you built, what you became. I wish I could have known him better. Me too. The balcony door opened and Sophie poked her head out. Daddy, they're doing the cake cutting thing and I need to supervise to make sure Gerald approves. Adrian smiled despite himself. We'll be right there, Bug. Sophie disappeared back inside. She's wonderful, Evelyn said. You're raising her right. I'm trying. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. That's parenthood, I think, based on what Noah used to say about our parents. They headed back inside, back to the noise and the lights, and the carefully orchestrated celebration. But something had shifted. The night that started with cruelty and mockery had transformed into something else entirely, something neither of them had expected. And as Adrian watched Evelyn laugh at something Sophie said, watched his daughter hold this stranger's hand like she'd known her forever, he realized that maybe, just maybe, they'd all found something they didn't know they were looking for. The cake cutting turned into a full production, mostly because Sophie insisted on narrating the entire process for Gerald the Dragon's benefit. By the time the photographer had gotten his shots and the servers had distributed slices to the tables, it was nearly 10 o'clock, and Sophie was starting to fade. Come on, Bug, Adrian said, lifting her into his arms. Time to head home. But I'm not tired, Sophie protested through a yawn that nearly dislocated her jaw. Sure you're not. I'm really not. I could stay up all night, maybe even 2 nights. Uh-huh. Evelyn stood nearby, looking uncertain, like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to say goodbye now or wait, or just disappear into the crowd. Where are you parked? Adrian asked her. I'm not. I took the bus. The bus doesn't run this late. I know. I was planning to walk part of the way and catch the first morning route. Adrian stared at her. You were going to walk. At night. Through downtown. I've done it before. That's insane. That's life when you can't afford a car. Sophie lifted her head from Adrian's shoulder. She can ride with us. Right, Daddy? Absolutely. Marcus? Adrian called across the ballroom. His CFO appeared instantly. Yes? Have the car brought around. We're leaving. Of course. Should I arrange for just the car? Thanks. 10 minutes later, they were in the back of Adrian's town car, Sophie sandwiched between him and Evelyn, already half asleep despite her earlier protests. Where do you live? Adrian asked. Evelyn gave an address on the east side. The driver's eyes flickered to the rear-view mirror and Adrian caught the look. Not a great neighborhood. Not even a decent one. They drove in silence for a while, the city sliding past outside tinted windows. Sophie's breathing had evened out into sleep, her head resting against Evelyn's arm. She likes you, Adrian said quietly. She's sweet. Too sweet for her own good, probably. That's what I'm afraid of. The world eats people like her alive. Or it doesn't. Maybe she changes it instead. That's optimistic. Someone has to be. Evelyn looked down at Sophie. My brother was like that. Optimistic. Believed in people even when they didn't deserve it. Drove our parents crazy. He believed in me. I was just some intelligence analyst who'd been in country 3 months. Barely knew which end of the rifle to point where. And he treated me like I mattered. That was Noah. He collected strays. I'm a stray? We all were to him. Anyone who looked lost or scared or out of place, he'd just adopt you into his circle and that was that. The car turned onto a street where half the streetlights were broken. Buildings leaned against each other like drunks, windows dark or covered with bars. This is me, Evelyn said as they pulled up to a 4-story walk-up that had seen better decades. The driver looked at Adrian in the mirror again, concern clear on his face. I'll walk you up, Adrian said. That's not necessary. Humor me. He carefully transferred Sophie to the seat. She mumbled something about dragons and cheese, and followed Evelyn out of the car. The building's front door hung crooked on its hinges. The lobby smelled like mildew, and something else Adrian didn't want to identify. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in sickly green. Elevator's broken, Evelyn said. Has been for 2 months. Which floor? 4th. Of course it was. They climbed in silence, their footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Someone was shouting behind one of the doors on the 2nd floor. Music thumped from another apartment, bass so heavy Adrian could feel it in his chest. By the 4th floor, Evelyn was breathing hard. Adrian noticed she favored her left leg slightly. From the accident? He asked, nodding at her leg. Shattered femur. They put it back together with pins and hope. Works most of the time. She stopped at apartment 4C and pulled out a key. This is me. Adrian looked at the door. 3 deadbolts, a chain, and what looked like additional reinforcement around the frame. Evelyn, don't. She cut him off. Don't look at me like that. I know what you're thinking. How can anyone live like this? This isn't safe. But this is what I can afford. This is what my life looks like. And I've made peace with it. Have you? I'm working on it. She unlocked the door but didn't open it. Thank you, she said quietly. For tonight, for the dance, for everything. I know you probably did it because you felt guilty about Noah, but it meant something anyway. It wasn't guilt. Then what was it? Adrian didn't have a clean answer for that. Didn't have words for the feeling that had hit him when he saw her sitting alone in that ballroom, or when Sophie had called her a princess, or when he'd realized that Noah's little sister had been suffering alone while he'd built an empire. It was the right thing to do, he said finally. The right thing. Evelyn smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, thanks for doing the right thing. I'm sure you have a lot of other right things to get back to. She started to open the door. Wait, Evelyn paused. The foundation, Adrian said. I meant what I said about the opportunity. We have programs, job training, education assistance, mentorship. If you wanted to get back into architecture, we could help make that happen. I told you I don't want charity. And I told you it's not charity. It's an investment in someone who has talent and got knocked down by circumstances beyond their control. You don't know if I have talent. You saw some pictures on Noah's phone a decade ago. So prove me wrong. Come to the foundation office Monday. Meet with the program director, see what's available. If you don't like it, walk away. But at least give yourself the chance to find out. Evelyn studied his face, looking for the catch. Why do you care? Because Noah saved my life and I can't pay him back. But maybe I can pay it forward? That's not a good enough reason. Fine. Because Sophie liked you, and my daughter's a better judge of character than I am. Because you walked into that ballroom knowing exactly how people would react, and you did it anyway. Because you're standing here in a building that should be condemned, with a scarred face and a broken leg, and a life that fell apart, and you're still fighting. That enough reasons? Evelyn's eyes went bright. I'll think about it, she said quietly. Fair enough. Adrian started back toward the stairs, then stopped. One more thing. That handkerchief. Noah's handkerchief. He pulled it from his pocket and held it out. This belongs to you. Evelyn stared at the faded blue fabric like he was offering her a live grenade. I can't take that. It's yours. Your family's. I've been carrying it for 11 years because I didn't know how to let it go. But you should have it. Adrian, please let me do this one thing right. Evelyn's hand shook as she reached out and took the handkerchief. The moment her fingers touched it, something in her expression crumbled. He always kept this in his pocket, she whispered. Even when we were kids. Mom gave it to him when he was 7 because he had terrible allergies and was always sniffling. He said it made him feel brave. It is brave. He gave it to a stranger in the middle of a firefight and told him to stay alive. That's about as brave as it gets. Evelyn pressed the fabric to her face, shoulders shaking. Adrian stood there awkwardly, unsure if he should leave or stay or say something else. He'd never been good at this. The emotional heavy lifting that Emma had handled so effortlessly. I'm sorry, Evelyn managed finally, wiping her eyes. I'm a mess. You're fine. I'm really not. But thank you for pretending. She looked at him for a long moment and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition of shared grief and survival and the exhausting work of keeping yourself together when everything wants to fall apart. Monday, Adrian said. 10 a.m. Foundation office on 5th and Morrison. Ask for Rachel Torres. She runs the programs. I haven't said yes yet. I know, but I'm an optimist. That got a small smile. Your daughter's rubbing off on you. Someone has to. Adrian headed down the stairs, and this time he didn't stop. By the time he reached the car, Sophie was awake and cranky. Where's Evelyn? She demanded. Home. In bed. Where you should be. I wanted to say goodbye. You were asleep. Well, I'm awake now. The drive home took 20 minutes through empty streets. Sophie kept up a running commentary about everything she'd seen that night, every person she'd talked to, every dessert she'd tasted. And Evelyn was really nice, she said as they pulled into the driveway of Adrian's house in the hills. Can we see her again? Maybe. That's adult for probably not. That's adult for we'll see. Also adult for probably not. Adrian carried her inside, past the housekeeper who'd waited up, past the living room where Emma's pictures still covered the mantel, up the stairs to Sophie's room. Her room was chaos. Books everywhere, stuffed animals staging what looked like a revolution against the dollhouse, drawings taped to every available surface. Brush your teeth. I'm too tired. Brush anyway. Fine, but I'm protesting. Noted. While Sophie grudgingly handled her bedtime routine, Adrian sat on the edge of her bed and looked around the room. So much of Emma was still here. The mobile she'd hung from the ceiling. The growth chart marked in her handwriting. The blanket she'd crocheted while pregnant. Every stitch uneven, but made with love. Sophie emerged from the bathroom in her pajamas, toothbrush still in hand. Do I have to go to sleep now? Yes. What if I'm not tired? Then you can lie there and think about dragons. She climbed into bed, and Adrian pulled the blanket up to her chin. Daddy? Yeah, Bug? Are you going to help Evelyn? I'm going to try. Good, because I think she's lonely, like us. Adrian's chest tightened. We're not lonely. We have each other. That's not the same. Mommy used to say that people need more than just family. They need friends and connections and people who make them feel like they matter. When did Mommy say that? Lots of times. She said that's why she started the foundation. Because everyone deserves to feel like they matter. Adrian looked at his daughter, this small, fierce person who remembered things he'd forgotten and saw things he'd missed. You're pretty smart, you know that? I know. I got it from you and Mommy. Good night, Sophie. Good night, Daddy. Don't forget about Evelyn. I won't. He kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door cracked the way she liked it. Downstairs, he poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and stood in his study, looking out at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, Evelyn was in that terrible apartment, probably unable to sleep, probably wondering if she'd actually show up on Monday, or if the fear of disappointment would keep her away. His phone buzzed. Marcus. We need to talk about the Hoffman situation. He's making noise about a lawsuit. Adrian typed back. Let him. Our lawyers are better. The board won't like this. The board will deal with it. He set the phone down and picked up a picture frame from his desk. Emma, hugely pregnant with Sophie, laughing at something off camera. Her hair was a mess. She had paint on her shirt from the nursery they'd been working on. She looked completely, perfectly happy. I met someone tonight, Adrian said to the picture. Noah Carter's little sister, the one he used to talk about all the time. She's been through hell, Em, lost everything, and she's still standing. The picture didn't answer, but he could almost hear Emma's voice anyway. So help her. I'm trying. I don't know if she'll let me. Then try harder. Adrian smiled despite himself. You always made it sound so simple. Because it is, you just make it complicated. He finished his scotch and headed upstairs. Tomorrow was Sunday. He'd promised Sophie they'd go to the park if the weather was decent, maybe get ice cream. Normal things. Regular things. Things that felt impossible when you were building an empire and raising a daughter alone and carrying the weight of survivor's guilt like a second skin. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Adrian felt something shift. Not happiness exactly. Not peace. But maybe the possibility of both. Monday morning came too fast. Adrian dropped Sophie at school and headed to the office, where Marcus was waiting with a stack of reports and a concerned expression. The board wants a meeting, today. Tell them I'm busy. Adrian, Marcus, I'm busy. He spent the morning in back-to-back calls, investors, department heads, the legal team handling the Hoffman mess. By noon, his head was pounding, and he'd consumed enough coffee to power a small city. His assistant knocked on the door. Mr. Vale? Rachel Torres from the foundation is on line 3. She says it's important. Adrian picked up the phone. Rachel, what's going on? She showed up. Rachel sounded surprised. The woman you emailed me about. Evelyn Carter. She's here. Something in Adrian's chest loosened. Put her through the standard intake. Education history, work experience, goals, and Rachel? Yes? Be nice to her. I'm always nice. Be extra nice. She's had a rough time. Understood. Adrian hung up and stared at his computer screen, not really seeing the quarterly projections displayed there. She'd shown up. He hadn't been sure she would, hadn't been sure she'd have the courage to walk through those doors and ask for help. But she had. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Evelyn. Rachel gave me your number. I hope that's okay. Adrian saved the contact and typed back. Of course. How's it going? Terrifying, but I'm here. That's the hard part. Everything else is just paperwork. I'm not good at paperwork. Nobody is. That's why we have people who do it for a living. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Thank you. For pushing me to come. Thank you for showing up. Adrian set the phone down and tried to focus on work. Failed miserably. Tried again. Failed worse. Finally, he gave up and called Rachel. How's she doing? Good, I think. She's qualified for our Architecture Education Partnership Program. We can cover tuition, books, living expenses while she finishes her degree. There's a mentorship component, too. Pair her with someone working in the field. Do it. Adrian, there's a waiting list. Other applicants who've been... I don't care. Put her through. Rachel was quiet for a moment. This is about more than just helping someone, isn't it? Her brother saved my life. I owe him. Okay, but just so you know, she's not accepting this because of guilt or obligation. She made that very clear. She wants to earn it. Then let her earn it. Give her the same requirements as everyone else, but give her the chance. Understood. Adrian ended the call and went back to pretending to work. The afternoon dragged. Meetings blurred together. Someone from PR wanted to discuss the gala coverage. Apparently the photos of Adrian dancing with Evelyn had gone viral on social media. The narrative was split between heartwarming and publicity stunt. Adrian told PR to issue a statement that he didn't comment on his personal life and to leave it at that. By 5 o'clock, he was done. He texted his assistant that he was leaving early and headed to pick up Sophie from her after-school program. She launched herself into his arms the moment she saw him. Daddy, guess what? What? I got a gold star in math, and Mrs. Henderson said my story about Gerald the Dragon was very imaginative, which I think is code for completely weird, but I'm being polite. Sounds about right. Can we get ice cream? It's Monday. So we get ice cream on weekends. That's a dumb rule. Your mother made that rule. Sophie's face fell slightly. She didn't talk about Emma much anymore, not because she'd forgotten, but because remembering hurt. Mommy made good rules, Sophie said quietly. She did, but I think we can break this one. Just this once. Sophie brightened immediately. Really? Really? But only because you got a gold star. They drove to the ice cream place Emma used to take Sophie to, a tiny shop that made everything from scratch and had flavors like lavender honey and burnt caramel sage. Sophie got her usual chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Adrian got coffee and immediately regretted it when the caffeine hit his already over-caffeinated system. They sat outside at a small table, watching people walk by. Daddy? Yeah? Did you help Evelyn today? I tried. She went to the foundation office. They're going to help her go back to school. To learn about buildings? Architecture, yeah. Sophie ate her ice cream thoughtfully. Do you think she's happy now? I don't know, Bug. Happiness is complicated. Adults say that a lot, but I don't think it is. Either you're happy or you're not. What about you? Are you happy? Sophie considered this seriously. Mostly. I miss Mommy, but I have you and ice cream and school and my friends. So, yeah, mostly happy. Mostly happy is pretty good. What about you? Adrian looked at his daughter, this small person who saw through every wall he tried to build. Yeah, he said, mostly happy. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. They finished their ice cream and headed home. Sophie did homework at the kitchen table, while Adrian attempted to cook dinner and mostly succeeded in not burning anything. After dinner, after bath time, after the bedtime routine, Adrian found himself back in his study with another glass of scotch and his phone. Evelyn had texted again. I start classes in 2 weeks, part-time while I work through the Foundation's job placement program. It's really happening. That's great. Congratulations. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For someone to realize they made a mistake and take it all back. Not going to happen. You earned this. I filled out forms. That's not earning anything. You showed up. That's earning everything. A long pause, then, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you doing this? Really, and don't say it's because of Noah. This is more than just paying back a debt. Adrian stared at the question for a long time. Finally, he typed, because when Emma died, I forgot how to see people. Really, see them. I was so busy surviving and taking care of Sophie and running the company that everyone else just became background noise. But watching you in that ballroom, seeing how people treated you, it reminded me that I used to be better than this. Used to care about more than just making it through another day. He hesitated, then added, Sophie liked you, and she doesn't like most people, so I figured you must be worth knowing. Another long pause. Your daughter is incredible. I know. She gets it from her mother. And from you. I don't know about that. I do. Anyone who raises a kid that kind and brave is doing something right. Adrian felt something warm settle in his chest. Thank you. Thank you. For tonight. For the Foundation. For treating me like a person instead of a problem. You were never a problem, Evelyn. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in 5 years. They texted for another hour. Small things. Nothing important. The kind of conversation that fills space without trying to solve anything. Finally, Evelyn sent, I should probably sleep. Big day tomorrow. Job orientation. Good luck. You'll be great. How do you know? Because Noah believed in you. And he had good instincts. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Evelyn. Adrian set his phone down and finished his scotch. Outside, the city hummed with life. Millions of people living their own stories, fighting their own battles, carrying their own scars. And somewhere out there, in a terrible apartment with broken elevators and questionable plumbing, Evelyn Carter was probably lying awake, afraid to believe that things might actually get better. Adrian understood that fear, had lived with it for 3 years. But tonight, for the first time since Emma died, he felt something else creeping in around the edges. Hope. small and fragile and terrifying in its possibility. But there. 3 weeks passed in a blur of routines that felt almost normal. Evelyn started her classes: Introduction to Structural Design, Architectural Theory, a remedial math course to catch up on what she'd forgotten. She worked mornings at the Foundation's community center, answering phones and filing paperwork, learning the rhythm of an office job again. And she texted Adrian, not constantly, not inappropriately, just small updates throughout the day. A photo of a building she liked. A complaint about her math professor who insisted on handwritten assignments. A joke Sophie had told her during one of their increasingly frequent phone calls. Because somehow, without anyone planning it, Sophie and Evelyn had become friends. It started when Sophie called Adrian's phone one afternoon and Evelyn answered by accident. She'd been holding it while Adrian grabbed coffee during a rare lunch they'd shared to discuss foundation business. Sophie had launched into a story about a substitute teacher who didn't believe in Gerald the Dragon, and Evelyn had listened and asked questions and made Sophie laugh so hard she snorted. After that, Sophie insisted on regular updates about Evelyn's life. What classes was she taking? Did she like her professors? Had she drawn any buildings yet? What was her favorite constellation? Adrian watched it happen with something between amusement and concern. His daughter didn't attach to people easily, not since losing Emma, but she'd latched onto Evelyn like she'd found a missing piece of herself. She called again, his housekeeper Mrs. Chen said one evening, holding out the phone. "Third time today." Adrian took it. "Bug, you're supposed to be doing homework." "I finished. It was easy. Can I talk to Evelyn?" "Evelyn's probably busy with her own homework." "She said I could call anytime. She said I was her favorite person to talk to." Adrian's chest did something complicated. "Let me check if she's available, okay?" He texted Evelyn. "Sophie wants to talk. You free?" The response came immediately. Always. He handed the phone back to Sophie, who immediately launched into a detailed explanation of why her science teacher was wrong about Pluto being a dwarf planet and how it deserved better. Adrian watched his daughter pace the living room, animated and happy, and so much like Emma, it hurt. She talked with her hands, laughed at her own jokes, asked questions that nobody else thought to ask. 15 minutes later, she hung up and handed him the phone back. "Evelyn's really smart," Sophie announced. "She knows all about buildings and stars, and she's going to show me how to draw perspective next time we see her." "Next time?" "Yeah, I told her she should come over for dinner. You're going to invite her, right?" "Sophie, right?" Adrian knew that tone. That was Emma's tone when she'd already decided something and was just waiting for him to catch up. "I'll ask her." "Good, because I already told her probably Saturday, and she said that sounded nice." "You set this up without checking with me first?" "Yep, because you would have made it all complicated and weird. This way it's simple." Adrian couldn't argue with that logic. Saturday came faster than he expected. He spent most of Friday panicking about what to cook. He wasn't a terrible cook, but he wasn't good either, and the idea of Evelyn seeing him burn pasta or undercooked chicken made him irrationally anxious. Finally, he gave up and ordered from the Italian place Emma used to love. If Sophie noticed the cheat, she didn't say anything. Evelyn arrived at 6:30, standing on the porch with a bottle of wine and an expression that suggested she was seconds away from running back to her car. "Hi," she said. "Hi, come in." She stepped inside and immediately froze. Adrian's house was nice. Objectively, anyone would say it was nice. Modern architecture with huge windows, high ceilings, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. But it wasn't ostentatious. Emma had made sure of that. Warm colors, family photos everywhere, Sophie's artwork taped to the refrigerator. "This is beautiful," Evelyn said quietly. "Thanks. Emma designed most of it. I just wrote the checks." "She had good taste." "Yeah, she did." Sophie came barreling around the corner, socks sliding on the hardwood floor. "Evelyn!" She crashed into Evelyn with a hug that nearly knocked her over. "You came!" "Of course I came. I promised, didn't I?" Some people promise and then don't show up. There was weight in that statement. History. Evelyn crouched down to Sophie's level. "I keep my promises," she said seriously. "If I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'll be there. Okay?" Sophie studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, want to see my room? I have a new drawing of Gerald. I would love to see it." They disappeared upstairs, Sophie chattering the entire way. Adrian stood in the foyer holding a bottle of wine he hadn't opened yet, feeling like a guest in his own house. Mrs. Chen appeared from the kitchen. "Dinner's ready. I put it in the warming drawer like you asked." "Thanks, Mrs. Chen. She seems nice, your friend." It's complicated." Mrs. Chen gave him a look that suggested she knew exactly what it was and wasn't buying his protests. "Emma would have liked her," she said simply, then gathered her coat and left. Adrian stood there for a long moment, that statement settling somewhere deep in his chest. Upstairs, he could hear Sophie's voice and Evelyn's laughter, genuine, unguarded laughter that he hadn't heard from her before. He opened the wine and poured 2 glasses. Dinner was chaos in the best way. Sophie insisted on telling stories between every bite, and Evelyn asked questions that kept her going. They talked about school and dragons and whether or not buildings had personalities. "Of course they do," Evelyn said. "Every building is different. Some are proud and tall. Some are quiet and thoughtful. Some are loud and want everyone to look at them." "What about our house?" Sophie asked. Evelyn looked around the dining room, considering. "Your house is warm. It wants people to feel safe here. It has big windows because it wants to let light in, but it also has lots of walls and corners for when you need to hide and think." Sophie's eyes went wide. "That's exactly what it is. How did you know?" "I pay attention to what buildings are trying to say." "Can you teach me to do that?" "If you want to learn." "I do. I really, really do." Adrian watched them talk, feeling like he was witnessing something important that he didn't fully understand. After dinner, Sophie convinced Evelyn to help with her bath time routine, which mostly involved Sophie creating elaborate scenarios with her bath toys while Evelyn asked questions and played along. Adrian cleaned up the kitchen and tried not to think about how easy this felt, how natural, how dangerous, because Evelyn wasn't staying. This was just dinner, just kindness, just 2 people who'd been through hell finding some brief comfort in each other's company. Nothing more. "She's asleep," Evelyn said, appearing in the kitchen doorway. "I think I wore her out with the pirate ship scenario." "The what?" "Her rubber duck was a pirate captain. It got very involved." Adrian smiled despite himself. "Coffee? Or more wine?" "Coffee sounds good." They moved to the living room, coffee mugs in hand, sitting on opposite ends of the couch with careful distance between them. "She's wonderful," Evelyn said quietly. "Sophie, you're raising her right." "I'm fumbling through it, making it up as I go." "That's all anyone does." Emma knew what she was doing. She had this natural instinct for parenting, for knowing what Sophie needed before Sophie knew herself. "I'm just trying not to screw it up too badly." "You're not screwing it up. Sophie's happy, adjusted, kind. Those things don't happen by accident." Adrian looked at his coffee. "Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. Like any second I'm going to mess up so badly that Sophie will realize her dad has no idea what he's doing." "She already knows that." He looked up, startled. "Kids aren't stupid," Evelyn continued. "Sophie knows you're figuring it out, but she also knows you love her and you're trying. That's what matters. Not perfection, just effort." "Is that what Noah thought? About your parents?" "Yeah, our parents were a mess. Dad worked too much. Mom worried about everything. They fought about money and stress and whether or not Noah should join the military, but they loved us, and they tried, and we knew it." "Do you miss them?" "Every day, but especially at weird times. When I see someone eating the specific brand of cereal my dad liked. When I smell my mom's perfume on a stranger. When something good happens, and I want to call them and then remember I can't." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "I got accepted into the architecture program this week. Full scholarship. Everything covered. It's huge. It's everything I thought I'd lost forever. And my first thought was, I need to tell Mom. And then I remembered." Adrian set his coffee down and moved closer, not thinking about the careful distance anymore. "I'm sorry." "Me too." They sat in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said finally. "Anything." "What happens when the guilt wears off?" Adrian frowned. "What do you mean?" "This, us, whatever this is, right now you're helping me because you feel guilty about Noah. Because you think you owe him something, but eventually that's going to fade. And then what?" "I don't know." That's honest, at least. Evelyn, no, it's okay. I'm not complaining. I'm grateful for everything. The foundation, the classes, the job, for tonight, for Sophie, for all of it. But I also know how this works. People help when it makes them feel good about themselves, when the story is compelling. But once the novelty wears off, they move on to the next thing. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Then Adrian didn't have an answer for that. Didn't have words for the complicated knot of feelings that had formed somewhere in his chest over the past 3 weeks. I don't know, he admitted. But it's not guilt, not anymore. Then what? I like you, he said simply. Sophie likes you. You make us laugh. You make us feel less alone. Is that not enough? Evelyn's eyes were bright. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared that I'm going to get used to this, to feeling like I matter to someone, and then it's going to disappear and I'll be right back where I started. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. Isabo? I mean it. Adrian shifted closer. Look, I don't know what this is. I don't know where it's going or what it means. But I know that I look forward to your texts. I know that Sophie talks about you constantly. I know that for the first time in 3 years, I'm not just surviving. I'm actually living, and that's because of you. That's a lot of pressure. I'm not trying to pressure you, I'm just telling you the truth. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. I look forward to your texts too, she said quietly. And Sophie's calls. And nights like this where I get to pretend I'm part of something normal. You're not pretending, you're part of something. What something? I don't know yet, but I want to find out. The space between them felt charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression changed. Everything okay? Adrian asked. My landlord. The building got cited for code violations. We have 30 days to vacate. What? She showed him the text. Official notice from the city. Multiple safety violations. Building condemned until repairs were made. Repairs the landlord apparently had no intention of making. This is the 3rd place in 2 years, Evelyn said, voice flat. Every time I get settled, something happens. Pipes burst. Electrical fires. Now this. Where will you go? I don't know. I'll figure it out. I always do. But Adrian could hear the exhaustion in her voice. The resignation. Move in here. The words came out before he'd fully thought them through. Evelyn stared at him. What? Move in here. We have 4 bedrooms. Sophie and I use 2. The other 2 are just sitting empty. You could have your own space. Privacy. And you wouldn't have to worry about landlords or code violations or safety. Adrian, that's insane. Why? Because we barely know each other. Because people will talk. Because it's completely inappropriate. People are already talking. Let them. What about Sophie? Sophie would love it. She's been asking when you're coming back since dinner ended. This is crazy. Probably, but it makes sense. You need a place to live. I have space. Sophie wants you here. What's the downside? The downside is what happens when this falls apart. When you get tired of having me around, or Sophie decides she doesn't like me anymore, or I do something that reminds you too much of Noah, and you can't look at me without feeling guilty. Adrian took her hand. I'm not going to get tired of you. Sophie's not going to change her mind. And I look at you, and I see you. Not Noah. Not guilt. Just you. Evelyn's hand was shaking in his. I can't afford to pay rent. Not real rent. I don't want your money. I want you safe. I want you focused on school instead of worrying about where you're going to sleep. I want Sophie to have someone in her life who isn't me or the housekeeper or her teachers. Why are you doing this? Because I can. Because it's the right thing. Because 3 weeks ago, you walked into a ballroom full of people who treated you like you were invisible. And instead of running away, you stayed. You danced with me. You let Sophie draw you pictures and call you at all hours. You showed up to the foundation when you were terrified. You keep showing up. And I want to give you a place where you don't have to be scared anymore. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Say yes. This is too much. It's not enough. But it's a start. She pulled her hand away and stood up, pacing to the window. If I do this, if I say yes, it can't be charity. I need to contribute something. Help with Sophie. Cook sometimes. Clean. Something. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I need to feel like I'm earning my place here. Otherwise, I'm just another project. Another person you're helping because it makes you feel better about yourself. Adrian stood and walked over to her. You're not a project, you're a person who deserves safety and stability and a chance to rebuild her life without constantly looking over her shoulder. I've been on my own for 5 years. I don't know how to not be. So learn. We'll figure it out together. Evelyn pressed her forehead against the window. What if I mess this up? What if I'm terrible at living with other people? What if Sophie realizes I'm not as great as she thinks and decides she doesn't want me around? Then we deal with it, but I don't think that's going to happen. You don't know that. No, but I'm willing to find out. Evelyn turned to look at him, and Adrian saw every fear and hope and desperate wish written across her face. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll do it. But we set ground rules, boundaries. This is temporary until I get on my feet properly, and the second it stops working for any of us, I leave. No guilt, no obligation, just a clean exit. Deal. They shook hands like business partners, and Adrian tried to ignore how right her hand felt in his. When's your eviction date? He asked. End of the month, 3 weeks. We'll get you moved in next weekend. I'll send some guys to pack up your apartment. I can pack my own stuff. I know you can, but why should you have to? Evelyn opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. I'm not used to people helping me. Get used to it. She smiled, small and uncertain, but real. This is completely insane, she said. Yeah, but the best things usually are. The next week passed in a strange haze of logistics and second-guessing. Adrian had his assistant coordinate the move while Evelyn worked and attended classes and tried not to panic about the decision she'd made. Sophie, meanwhile, was ecstatic. Evelyn's going to live with us? She'd shrieked when Adrian told her. Really? Forever? Not forever, just until she gets settled. So forever. Got it. Sophie, Daddy, this is the best thing ever. We can have breakfast together, and she can help me with homework, and maybe she'll teach me about buildings and stars and everything. Adrian hoped he hadn't just made a catastrophic mistake. Moving day arrived on a Saturday that threatened rain but never delivered. Adrian showed up at Evelyn's apartment with 3 guys from a moving company and found her sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes. That's everything, she said, gesturing around. Not much, I know. Adrian looked at the sparse collection. A few boxes of clothes, some books, a single lamp, kitchen supplies that fit in one container. This is it? This is everything you own? I had to sell most of it after the accident. Medical bills, rent, survival. One of the movers, a guy named Pete, picked up a box and frowned. This one's damaged. Want me to grab some packing tape? It's fine, Evelyn said quickly. Just be careful with it. Adrian watched Pete carry the box downstairs and felt something crack in his chest. This was her entire life, everything she owned, fitting in the back of a truck with room to spare. Hey, Evelyn said, noticing his expression. I'm okay. This is more than I had a month ago. That's not the point. Then what is? The point is you deserve more than this. You deserve a life that doesn't fit in 6 boxes. I'll get there. I'm working on it. The move took less than 2 hours. By noon, Evelyn's boxes were stacked in the bedroom Adrian had designated as hers, the one with the ensuite bathroom and the view of the garden Emma had planted before she got too sick to maintain it. This is too much, Evelyn said, looking around the room. This is bigger than my entire apartment. It's just a room. It's not just a room. It's beautiful. Sophie appeared in the doorway. Do you like it? Daddy and I picked out new sheets and everything. We got blue because you said blue was your favorite color that one time on the phone. Evelyn's eyes went bright. You remembered that? Of course. I remember everything important. Evelyn pulled Sophie into a hug, and Adrian had to look away before he completely fell apart. That night, they ordered pizza and ate it on the living room floor because Sophie insisted that was the proper way to celebrate someone moving in. They watched a movie Sophie picked, something animated with talking animals and musical numbers, and Evelyn laughed in all the right places and didn't seem to mind when Sophie fell asleep with her head in Evelyn's lap. Adrian carried his daughter to bed while Evelyn cleaned up the pizza boxes. You don't have to do that, he said when he came back downstairs. I know, but I want to. I need to pull my weight. Evelyn, Adrian, Let me do this, please." So he did. They worked in comfortable silence, Evelyn cleaning, Adrian putting away dishes, the house settling around them with quiet creaks and sighs. "Thank you," Evelyn said finally. "For this, for all of it. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it. You don't have to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do, because this is the kind of thing people dream about and never actually get. And I got it because I happened to walk into a ballroom on the same night you decided to notice me." "I noticed you before the dance." "What?" "When you walked in, when security gave you a hard time, when you sat in that corner trying to disappear. I saw you then." Evelyn set down the dish towel she'd been holding. "Why didn't you say something?" "I don't know. Maybe I was waiting for the right moment, or maybe I was trying to convince myself it wasn't my problem. But then you changed your mind. Then I saw how they treated you, and I realized that if I didn't do something, I'd be just as bad as them." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Standing by while something wrong happens, that's not neutrality. That's complicity." Evelyn walked over to him, and for a moment Adrian thought she might hug him or kiss him, or do something that would irrevocably change whatever this fragile thing between them was. Instead, she just took his hand and held it. "I'm glad you noticed me," she said quietly. "Me too." They stood there in the kitchen, hands linked, the future stretching out ahead of them, uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. And for the first time in years, Adrian wasn't afraid of it. Living together turned out to be nothing like Adrian expected and exactly like Sophie predicted, which is to say it was chaotic and wonderful and occasionally a complete disaster. The first morning, Evelyn woke up at 5:30 out of habit from years of catching early buses and found Adrian already in the kitchen, making coffee in the dark. "Jesus," she yelped, clutching her chest. "You scared me." "Sorry, couldn't sleep." "You do this every morning?" "Most mornings. Coffee?" "Please." They sat at the kitchen island in companionable silence while the sun rose over the garden, painting everything gold. "This is weird, right?" Evelyn said finally. "Us living together. You barely know me." "I know enough. You know I had a brother who died and a face that scares people. That's not exactly a complete biography. I know you remember Sophie's favorite color. I know you triple-check that you locked the door because you're afraid of forgetting. I know you hum when you're concentrating and you still have nightmares about the accident." Evelyn stared at him. "How do you know about the nightmares?" "You cried out last night, around 2. I almost came to check on you, but I didn't want to overstep." Her face flushed. "I'm sorry. I'll try to be quieter. Don't apologize. I have them too. About Emma's last days, about Afghanistan, about all the ways I've failed and all the ways I'm still failing. We can be nightmares neighbors together." That got a small laugh. "Nightmare neighbors. That's bleak. Welcome to my brain at 5 a.m. Sophie appeared an hour later, stumbling into the kitchen with Bedhead and her elephant tucked under one arm. "Is Evelyn still here?" she asked groggily. "Where else would I be?" Evelyn said from her spot at the counter. Sophie's entire face lit up, like she'd half expected this to be a dream and was thrilled to discover it wasn't. "You're really staying." "I'm really staying." "Forever?" "Sophie," Adrian warned. "What? I'm just asking." "For now," Evelyn said gently. "We'll see what happens." "That's adult for probably forever," Sophie announced, climbing onto the stool next to Evelyn. "Can we have pancakes?" The first week established a rhythm. Adrian left for work early, Evelyn got Sophie ready for school, then headed to her classes. Afternoons were job training at the foundation or homework at the kitchen table, while Sophie did her own assignments nearby, asking questions and stealing Evelyn's colored pencils. Dinners were a group effort, sometimes successful, sometimes resulting in takeout after someone burned something beyond recognition. "I can't believe you managed to burn rice," Adrian said one evening, staring at the scorched pot. "I got distracted," Evelyn protested. "Sophie was showing me her science project." "It was a very good science project," Sophie said loyally. "Worth burning rice for. Next time maybe just pause the stove." "There's a pause button?" Adrian and Sophie both stared at her. "You're kidding," Adrian said. "I mean, there's an off button." "Evelyn." "What?" "We need to teach you how to cook." "I know how to cook, I just get distracted." "You burned water last week." "That was one time," Sophie giggled, and the sound filled the kitchen with something that felt dangerously close to happiness. But it wasn't all easy. 2 weeks in, Evelyn came home from class to find Adrian in his study, staring at his computer with an expression that could have curdled milk. "Bad day?" she asked from the doorway. "The board's questioning the foundation's spending, specifically the education program, specifically your scholarship." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What?" "Richard Hoffman's firm is still bitter about losing the Vision Tech contract. They've been making noise about nepotism and inappropriate allocation of charitable funds. Because of me. Because they're assholes looking for ammunition. Adrian, if this is causing problems, it's not." "But you just said—" "The board can question all they want. The foundation's finances are clean. Your scholarship met all the criteria. This is them being petty, not a real issue." "But if it becomes a real issue—" "It won't. You can't know that." Adrian looked up from his computer, and Evelyn saw exhaustion written across his face. "I'm handling it, okay? You don't need to worry about this." "Of course I need to worry about it. If people think I'm taking advantage, nobody thinks that. Hoffman does. Hoffman's an idiot who's mad I called him out in front of 500 people. This isn't about you. It's about him trying to save face." Evelyn wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that this was just noise that would fade away. But she'd learned the hard way that noise had a way of becoming real problems. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her, and tried to ignore the voice in her head that said she didn't belong here. Around midnight, there was a soft knock on her door. "Come in." Sophie peeked inside, clutching her elephant. "Can't sleep?" Evelyn asked. Sophie shook her head and climbed onto the bed without waiting for permission. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Are you going to leave?" The question landed like a punch. "What makes you think I'm going to leave?" "I heard Daddy on the phone. He was talking about the board and money and you, and people always leave when things get complicated." Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact, but Evelyn could hear the fear underneath. "Who left you?" Evelyn asked gently. "Mommy, I know she didn't want to. I know she was sick, but she still left. And then Grandma and Grandpa moved away because they said being here made them too sad. And my best friend Mia moved to California. And everyone says they'll stay and then they don't." Evelyn pulled Sophie into her lap, holding her tight. "I'm not leaving. Not because of the board or Hoffman or anything else, okay? You promise?" "I promise. The only way I'm leaving this house is if you and your dad decide you don't want me here anymore." "We'll never decide that." "Then I guess you're stuck with me." Sophie hugged her harder, and Evelyn felt something fierce and protective settle in her chest. This kid had been through too much. Lost too much, and Evelyn would be damned if she became another person who walked away. The board meeting happened 3 weeks later. Adrian tried to keep Evelyn out of it, but she insisted on being there. "It's about me," she said. "I should get to defend myself." "You shouldn't have to defend yourself." "But I do, so I'm going." The boardroom was exactly what Evelyn expected. Expensive furniture, expensive suits, expensive people who looked at her like she was a stain on their quarterly reports. Richard Hoffman sat near the end of the table, looking smug. Adrian stood at the head of the table and went through the presentation calmly. Foundation spending, scholarship criteria, success metrics, everything clean and documented. Then Hoffman raised his hand. "With all due respect, Adrian, the optics here are problematic. You met this woman at a gala, made a public spectacle of dancing with her, and then immediately fast-tracked her through a program that has a waiting list of qualified candidates. How is that not favoritism?" "Because," Adrian said evenly, "she met every qualification. Her academic record before the accident was exceptional. Her financial need is documented, and the program exists specifically to help people who've faced significant hardship rebuild their lives. That's exactly what we're doing. But you're also living with her." The room went silent. Evelyn felt every eye turn toward her. "How is that relevant?" Adrian asked, voice dangerous. "It suggests a personal relationship that's influencing professional decisions. My personal life is not up for discussion." "It is when it affects foundation business." Adrian's jaw clenched, and Evelyn knew he was about to say something that would make this worse. She stood up. "Can I say something?" Hoffman looked annoyed. "This is a board meeting." "Let her speak," one of the other board members said. Margaret Chen, the foundation's legal advisor. "I'd like to hear what she has to say." Evelyn's hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. Mr. Hoffman is right. The optics look bad. Adrian met me at a gala, helped me, and now I'm living in his house and receiving foundation support. From the outside, it looks like favoritism, or something worse. Adrian made a noise of protest, but Evelyn kept going. But here's what you're missing. Before that gala, I was living in a building with broken elevators and no heat. I was working 3 part-time jobs just to afford rent on a place that got condemned for safety violations. I had given up on ever finishing my degree or building the career I'd dreamed about since I was 12 years old. She looked around the table. The foundation didn't give me an opportunity because Adrian felt sorry for me. It gave me an opportunity because I qualified, because I had the grades and the need and the determination, and yes, Adrian helped me apply. Yes, he advocated for me. But that's what the foundation is supposed to do. Help people who need it. But the living arrangement, Hoffman started. The living arrangement happened because my building was condemned and I had nowhere to go. Adrian offered me a safe place to stay while I got back on my feet. That's called kindness. And if this board has a problem with kindness, then maybe you should reconsider what this foundation is supposed to stand for. Margaret was smiling. A few other board members were nodding. Hoffman looked furious. This is highly irregular. So is dancing with me in front of 500 people, Evelyn interrupted. So is calling you out for mocking me. So is every other thing Adrian has done that didn't fit into your neat little boxes of what's appropriate. But you know what? Those irregular things changed my life. They gave me hope when I had none. They reminded me that I'm worth more than what I see in the mirror every morning. She turned to face Hoffman directly. You're mad because Adrian stood up to you, because he chose decency over your ego. This isn't about foundation spending or optics. This is about you trying to hurt him by going after me. And I'm not going to let that happen. The room was silent. Then Margaret started clapping. Slowly at first, then with more enthusiasm. Well said, Miss Carter. Well said. Another board member joined in, then another. Hoffman's face went red. This is absurd. You can't just... Motion to close the review, Margaret said. The scholarship was awarded appropriately, the foundation's finances are clean, and Ms. Carter has demonstrated exactly the kind of determination and character this program was designed to support. All in favor? 7 hands went up. Motion passes, meeting adjourned. People filed out, several stopping to shake Evelyn's hand or offer quiet words of support. Hoffman left without looking at anyone. When the room was empty except for her and Adrian, Evelyn finally let herself breathe. You didn't have to do that, Adrian said quietly. Yes, I did. You could have stayed quiet. Let me handle it. And let Hoffman think he could bully me into disappearing? No chance. Adrian smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him all day. You were amazing. I was terrified. Couldn't tell. Good. That was the point. They walked out of the building together, and Evelyn felt something shift inside her, some weight she'd been carrying for 5 years finally lifting. She'd stood up for herself, spoken in front of a room full of people who could have destroyed her, and she'd won. That evening, Sophie insisted they celebrate with ice cream even though it was a weekday. Evelyn faced down the mean board people, Sophie announced. That deserves ice cream. How do you even know about the board meeting? Adrian asked. Mrs. Chen told me when she picked me up from school. She said Evelyn was magnificent. Mrs. Chen talks too much. Mrs. Chen tells the truth, Sophie corrected. There's a difference. They went to the ice cream place and sat outside, watching the sun set over the city. Can I ask you something? Sophie said to Evelyn. Always. Why do you still look sad sometimes, even when good things are happening? Evelyn glanced at Adrian, who was very carefully not intervening. Because, Evelyn said slowly, good things don't erase bad things. They just exist alongside them. I can be happy about school and living with you guys and still be sad that my family's gone. Both feelings can be true at the same time. That sounds exhausting. It really is. Do you think it gets better? I think it gets different. The sad parts don't go away, but they get smaller. And the happy parts take up more room, so eventually there's more happy than sad. Sophie considered this seriously. Are we a happy part? The happiest part I've had in a long time. Sophie beamed and went back to her ice cream, apparently satisfied with that answer. Adrian caught Evelyn's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." She mouthed back, "Any time." The months that followed weren't perfect. There were arguments about stupid things, whose turn it was to do dishes, whether Sophie could have a second dessert, how late was too late for an 8-year-old to stay up watching movies. There were hard days when Evelyn's classes overwhelmed her, or Adrian got stuck in meetings until midnight, or Sophie had a meltdown about missing her mom. But there were good days too. Days when Evelyn aced an exam and came home to find Adrian and Sophie had made a congratulations banner out of printer paper and markers. Days when Adrian closed a major deal and they celebrated with champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Sophie, who insisted on making toast that made no sense but were hilarious anyway. Days when Sophie's school had parent-teacher conferences and both Adrian and Evelyn showed up, and the teacher assumed they were married until Sophie very seriously corrected her that they were just living together because they like each other, but nobody said it out loud yet. "Sophie," Adrian had choked. "What?" "It's true." The teacher had tried very hard not to laugh. 6 months in, Evelyn finished her first semester with perfect grades. The program director called to congratulate her and mentioned that a local architecture firm was looking for interns. "It's entry level," Rachel said, "mostly grunt work, but it's experience, and they specifically requested candidates from our program." Evelyn interviewed the next week. The firm was small, just 5 architects working out of a renovated warehouse, but they were doing interesting work: community projects, affordable housing, libraries and schools, the kind of work that mattered. They offered her the internship on the spot. "You start Monday," the senior partner said. 10 hours a week while you're in school. We'll work around your class schedule." Evelyn walked out of that building and called Adrian, crying too hard to speak. "What happened?" he demanded. "Are you okay?" "I got it," she managed. "The internship, I got it." "Of course you got it. You're brilliant." "I'm not." "You are. And now other people are finally noticing." That night, they had an actual celebration. Adrian cooked, or attempted to cook, a fancy dinner that turned out only slightly burned. Sophie made another banner. They ate on the good china that had been sitting unused in the cabinet since Emma died. "To new beginnings," Adrian said, raising his glass. "To not giving up," Evelyn added. "To ice cream," Sophie contributed, because of course she did. They clinked glasses, and Evelyn looked around the table at these 2 people who'd become her family without her quite noticing when it happened. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For seeing me when nobody else would. For believing I was worth the effort." "You've always been worth it," Adrian said. "You just needed someone to remind you." Later, after Sophie was in bed and the dishes were done, Evelyn and Adrian sat in the living room with the lights low and the city glittering outside the windows. "Can I tell you something?" Evelyn said. "Anything. I'm happy, really happy, for the first time since before the accident, and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I keep waiting for it to fall apart, for something to go wrong, for you to realize this was a mistake." Adrian set down his drink and turned to face her. "It's not a mistake. None of this is a mistake." "How do you know?" "Because I'm happy too. And I haven't been happy since Emma died. I've been functional. I've been successful. I've been a decent father, but I haven't been happy until you showed up and reminded me what that feels like." Evelyn's breath caught. "Adrian, I'm not saying this to pressure you into anything. I'm just saying it because it's true. You and Sophie, you've become my favorite parts of the day. Coming home to you guys, hearing about your classes, watching Sophie drag you into her latest scheme. All of it. I don't want that to end." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you to stay. Not temporarily, not until you get on your feet. Just stay. Be part of this family we've accidentally built." "We can't accidentally build a family." "Why not? We accidentally built everything else." Evelyn laughed despite herself. "That's true. Nothing about this has been planned." "So what do you say? Want to keep not planning things together?" Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, at the exhaustion and hope and genuine affection written across his face. "I have conditions," she said. "Okay. I pay rent once the internship turns into a real job. I'm not living here for free forever." "Agreed." "And we tell Sophie the truth. No more dancing around what this is. She deserves honesty." "Agreed. And you have to stop trying to fix everything for me. I need to be allowed to fail sometimes, to struggle, to figure things out on my own." That one's harder, but okay. And one more thing. What? Evelyn took a breath. If we're doing this, really doing this, then we need to talk about Emma, about Noah, about all the ghosts we're carrying around. Because I can't be a replacement for her, and you can't be my savior because you feel guilty about him. We need to be us, whatever that means. Adrian was quiet for a long time. Emma would have liked you, he said finally. She would have liked your stubbornness and your refusal to accept help, and the way you challenge me instead of just agreeing with everything I say. And Noah, his voice cracked slightly. Noah would have been proud of who you've become, of how you survived everything that tried to break you. You think so? I know so, because I'm proud of you, and I barely know you compared to how well he knew you. Evelyn wiped her eyes. This is really happening, isn't it? We're really doing this. If you want to. I want to. I really, really want to. Adrian pulled her into a hug, and Evelyn let herself sink into it. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found a place where she belonged. They told Sophie the next morning over breakfast. So Evelyn's staying forever now? Sophie asked, looking between them. If that's okay with you, Evelyn said. Are you kidding? This is the best news ever. Can I tell my teacher? Can I tell everyone? You can tell whoever you want, Adrian said. Sophie launched herself at both of them, creating a group hug that nearly knocked over the orange juice. This is the best family, she announced. We have Daddy who's smart but can't cook, and Evelyn who's smart and also can't cook, and me who's going to learn to cook so we don't all starve. That's a solid plan, Evelyn said, laughing. I know. I'm full of good plans. The year that followed brought changes nobody expected. Evelyn's internship turned into a job offer. Sophie started 4th grade and joined the school's art club. Adrian cut back his hours at Vision Tech to spend more time at home. They became a unit, a team, a family that looked nothing like what any of them had planned, but somehow worked anyway. There were still hard days. Days when Evelyn caught her reflection and flinched. Days when Adrian disappeared into his study because the grief hit without warning. Days when Sophie cried about wanting her mom. But there were more good days than bad. Days when they went to the park, and Sophie taught them both how to identify constellations. Days when Evelyn's first design got approved for construction, and they celebrated by attempting to bake a cake that collapsed but tasted good anyway. Days when Adrian came home early just because he wanted to have dinner with his family. One evening, almost exactly a year after the gala, Adrian found Evelyn in the garden Emma had planted. She was sitting on the bench, looking at the stars. You okay? He asked. Yeah, just thinking. About how a year ago I was living in a condemned building, eating ramen for every meal, convinced that my life was never going to get better. And now I'm here. I have a job I love, a family, a future that doesn't terrify me. Adrian sat down beside her. You did that. Not me. Not the foundation. You. You showed up. You did the work. You refused to give up. I had help. Everyone needs help. That doesn't make your accomplishment any less real. Evelyn leaned against his shoulder. Thank you, she said quietly, for noticing me, for dancing with me, for giving me a chance when I'd stopped giving myself chances. Thank you for letting me, for trusting that maybe not everyone is going to hurt you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Inside the house, Sophie was probably supposed to be doing homework, but was almost certainly drawing another picture of Gerald the dragon. Tomorrow, Evelyn had class and work, Adrian had meetings, Sophie had school and art club. Normal things, regular things, the kind of life that felt impossible a year ago. Hey, Adrian said suddenly. Yeah? I love you. The words hung in the air between them. Evelyn turned to look at him, eyes bright. I love you too, both of you. This whole weird, unplanned, accidental family. Best accident I ever had. Same. They sat there until Sophie called them inside for dinner. Another cooking experiment that would probably end in takeout, but would be fun in the attempt. And as they walked back toward the house, toward the light and warmth and chaos waiting inside, Evelyn realized something. She'd been so focused on what she'd lost, her family, her face, her dreams, that she'd almost missed what she'd found. Not a replacement for what was gone, Not a consolation prize, but something new, something real, something worth holding on to. A billionaire who'd learned to see past wealth and success to what actually mattered. A little girl who'd lost her mother but refused to stop believing in goodness. And a woman who'd survived hell and come out the other side scarred, but not broken. Three broken pieces that had somehow fit together into something whole. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magic fix for grief or trauma or the weight of loss. Life was still hard. Scars still ached, memories still hurt. But there was also laughter and Sunday morning pancakes and Sophie's terrible jokes and Adrian's even worse attempts at cooking and late-night conversations about everything and nothing. There was family. Not the one any of them had planned for, not the one they'd lost, but the one they'd built together, piece by piece, day by day, through courage and kindness and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. And in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.